So we've seen the process so far. And honestly, for something like Sunday comics, this is about as far as it would ever get because they have to be colored and turned around very quickly. But if you want like a higher level of illustration with more thought put into it, we might go beyond just the duotone hard edge color. The reason that's used for animation is not because it's the most effective visual, but because it's the most consistent and can be repeated quickly. Now if I take this duotone example, and I realize, well, the outside shape is lemon-like, but the problem is it looks like it's a rubber whoopee cushion or something, just as much as a lemon. It doesn't have that distinct kind of texture and shine of a lemon. So why don't I add some soft edge duotone? And what you do for that is you just use a brush that is soft. It's like an airbrush. You might even do a lower opacity so you can build it slowly. And the thing I like most in Photoshop is that I can steal the colors from what I've already chosen just by holding down, when I'm on the brush tool, holding down the Option key. And I can soften that shadow a little bit so it doesn't look so rubbery. And I can also use white, especially if I'm doing it at a low opacity, and soften the highlights. And this gets closer to digital painting, except that everything still exists within a real outline. And you can even show some of your advanced color theory knowledge and lighting knowledge by having reflected light and core shadows. And I can even pick darker colors, kind of run that core shadow. Onto this lemon to really kind of turn it around in space. And I can get soft edge duotone coloring. Very, very different than hard edge. Right? But it's still based on the principles of hard edge. Now that's not to say on this hard edge duotone coloring I couldn't simply add white as well. But if I do that, it's going to look like it's made out of shiny metal. Or something kind of distinctly unlemon-like. And if I wanted a core shadow, I could add black when I'm doing duotone. Strict cut edge duotone. But again, that's going to look kind of like a sword or something. I like the thinner one better. It's not really what we're looking for. But it's worth remembering that duotone can have white and black added into it as well. Okay, so this is what we call soft edge color. But still duotone, because the only colors are value variations on one hue, on one color, that yellow. It's just softly gradated. Now, why do we do a separate vector outline? Well, look at that. My soft brush went over my black lines. And that's why we always keep our line work separate. Whoops. so that it can go over the top. Of the other pieces we've done, or the coloring, like stained glass window. This is the tracery. This is the metal work that holds in the color, and you always want it on top. Right. The other nice thing about that is I can select around that line work and erase all the outside edges. Okay, now what's the next step after we've done this full duotone, soft edge, selective hard edge color like I have here with Putin? What other options do we have? Basically, we now start flirting more and more with finished painting. And if we do more painting, we add more color theory, we start to get limited by this black line work. And what's interesting about that is we'll have to modify that black line work eventually. We'll have to treat it as a separate entity. So here, I might take this example. Whoops. And because it's all the same color, no matter what I do with levels or with contrast, I can make it brighter, I can make it darker, but it will always be the same variations on yellow. So what if I wanted to do something more like this? Shift the color balance so that the highlights were warm and the shadows were cool. And all of a sudden, we have what's called full spectrum color. Because even though the local color is yellow, we can bring other colors into it, like greens and blues. And if I really want to get intense with my coloring and my color theory, I might bring some purples into there, in the coloring. At a low saturation, because it's the complement of yellow, if I put a little bit of that in the shadow, it's going to really contrast in the strongest way possible and turn that form. So this is what we call full spectrum color, but notice it's still behind a clean line work. But the problem is if we do too much with full spectrum color and line work, like if I have black line work inking showing the texture instead of just the coloring, like, let's see, like this. This is the problem comics, when they first started to be digitally colored heavily in the 90s, dealt with. They would have it overly inked and shaded, and then also kind of digitally full spectrum colored behind, and they would just get way too busy. It'd be too much. So that's the problem with it. So what's the solution? When your digital painting gets too intense and you want it to be almost fully photorealistic, you can't rely on just full spectrum color alone. You need to start adapting the black line work itself. And this is where we get to what are called color holds. And color holds affect the black line and go on top of the black line. So I'm just going to select out this black line. I'm going to put it on its own layer above. And now I'm going to start messing with it to help support this painting a little bit more, that coloring. And it can be as simple as going to hue saturation and clicking on colorize and picking a hue for your line and saturating it. So what if that line is no longer black, but instead goes to that green? All of a sudden, that painting doesn't seem so overdone, right? Other ways we can use color holds. So this lemon is obviously has a light source coming here. It's reflecting. What if I want to have highlights affecting the line work? So it's so shiny, like a sword, that I actually have a little glow happening right here. Little glow happening right here. That affects the line work itself. It's a very shiny lemon. So let the computer catch up with me. And so the outline can gradate and change with the lighting. These are called color holds. And those are some of the special effects that we can use, especially if we want to make something look like it's glowing. So this is with color holds. And color holds go above the black line work and sometimes replace it. Okay, and those are kind of all of our digital coloring options. Once we get rid of the line work entirely, now we're looking at just digital painting. And this has been our digital coloring primer. All right. So how do we apply that to our spot illustrations? Well, is there anything that I want to feel like it's just glowing here on Putin? Or is there anything I want to be colored more than just with its one local color, value variations, it's one local color? Well, maybe the bear skin. Maybe I want to add a different kind of color into there, like maybe some purples. So I'm going to make a new coloring layer. I'm going to paint with a low opacity and a soft edge, and I'll add some full spectrum shadows into that. But this isn't necessarily going to be the best thing for the illustration. It's just so I can kind of show you some of these options. Too strong. Let's take it down a little bit. So bring a little bit of purple into those shadows. A little bit of purple into these. I'm doing it underneath my soft edged layer. So I still have all those soft edge strokes coming through. So it works as kind of a core shadow. Especially with the orange Ritz crackers, that purple really helps to kind of make it more dimensional. I'm doing it at a low opacity, just making slight adjustments to it, to these browns with a different color. That's why it's called full spectrum. I'm allowed to basically use any colors I want despite the local color. But I don't want to overdo it. See, and that's where I painted all the purples, but I'm putting it under my soft edge duotone layer, so it just heightens those colors.